Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Minority Member, members of the committee. Good morning. My name is Athan Manuel, and I direct the Lands Program for the Sierra Club, and I'm here representing over 750,000 Sierra Club members who belong to more than 65 chapters and 45 groups around the country, and that makes us the largest grassroots environmental organization in the country. And before I start, I'm a little confused as to how I should begin. I've come to some of these hearings before, and I know a lot of times witnesses open by hailing the Red Sox, but now with the Celtics in the finals, I'm not sure what is the correct way to pander to the chairman on that. So
you're doing a good job.
So there we go. But turning to the future of oil, I want to mainly discuss two issues. One is just gas prices, and the second one is access to resources here in the United States. A lot of the members have already mentioned this. Some of my panelists have mentioned it too, that we all know Americans are paying a record amount of prices for a gallon of gas, over $4 a gallon. And it's disappointing when you consider that we were first put on notice about gas prices almost 40 years ago in the first Arab oil shock. And it's disappointing from our perspective to see that 35, 40 years later, we're still dependent on fossil fuels like oil, natural gas, and coal. And in addition to pandering about the Red Sox, I've got to talk about myself a little bit more. I'm a Greek American, and my parents love quoting the ancient Greeks and like Homer, but in this case I've got to quote Homer Simpson, so I'm glad I'm not making the first cartoon reference, but Homer Simpson says, "Stupidity got us into this mess, and stupidity will get us out." And that's the disappointing part about this some of the energy policies being promoted, that it calls for more drilling when drilling is really the problem. And all we've got to show for a pretty aggressive drilling for the last 35 years is, again, $4 for a gallon of gas. If we are truly addicted to oil and gas, which President Bush said in a recent State of the Union address, we clearly think the answer is not to seek a bigger fix by drilling in special places like the Arctic Refuge or off of our coasts and off of our beaches. When looking at the Arctic Refuge in particular, the Energy Information Administration admitted or released a report last week that mentioned that peak production, which wouldn't be until 2027, the effect on prices at the pump, if any, would be a few pennies from drilling in the Arctic Refuge. So we don't think drilling there is the solution or would reduce prices. By contrast, EIA research indicates that clean energy and energy efficiency technologies could do 10 times more to help reduce our dangerous dependence on foreign oil and fossil fuels. The same example holds true for the Outer Continental Shelf. If you look at the eastern Gulf of Mexico in particular, which is kind of the area of highest industry interest, there's only about 930 million barrels of oil thought to be in that area. Again, against current rates of consumption, that's just not much oil, certainly not enough oil to, again, reduce the price of gas that consumers pay at the pump. Again, looking at the OCS, a vast majority, 80% of the nation's undiscovered, technically recoverable oil and gas is located in areas that are already open for drilling, according to the Department of the Interior. And Ms. Solis mentioned that in her opening statement, that even if we drilled everywhere in the United States, we wouldn't have enough supply to impact prices or to help consumers at the pump. Finally, on access, again, many of the opening statements mentioned how the oil companies have access to quite a few areas, both onshore and offshore. A new report by the Natural Resources Committee here in the House mentioned that the permitting of drilling permits has exploded in recent years, going from 3,800 5 years ago to more than 7,500 in 2007. The same is true onshore and offshore, whether we're looking at our public lands, BLM lands, or offshore. Clearly, we think that more drilling and leasing in the United States will not lower gas prices. We just simply, again, don't have that much oil and gas left in the United States. As, again, some of the other panelists have said this morning, the price of oil is set on the world market, largely by OPEC. It's also influenced by speculation, increases in demand in Asia and China and India, and by a weak dollar. And again, we don't think leasing and drilling is not going to solve that problem. This year, there have been 2 huge leases held in the Chukchi Sea and in the Gulf of Mexico, and obviously prices have still gone up. And again, these large leases underscore the issue that there's no lack of access to areas here in the United States. And if you look back again 30 years, since the first Arab oil shock in the early 70s, the U.S. has produced almost 90 billion barrels of oil since then. So we've tried drilling our way out of the problem, and it just hasn't worked. Fortunately, we think now this new Congress is starting to take steps to solve the problem. Last year, under the leadership of Mr. Markey and other members of Congress did pass increases in fuel economy standards for the first time. There are many innovative programs being offered this year by members of Congress to get us off of fossil fuels and use more renewables. And we think that is clearly the best way to go when looking at energy policy. So when we look at the future of oil, we hope that we really see a future of clean, renewable energy and energy efficiency programs. We really are optimistic that America can innovate our way out of this problem. And instead of doing the failed policies of the past, which is, again, more and more drilling everywhere here in the United States, we should look towards energy efficiency solutions, clean energy programs, and renewables that would get us off of fossil fuels, reduce global warming pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, and put Americans to work on a clean energy future, not a future of oil. Thank you for the time, Mr. Chairman, and for the invitation.